Hi, I'm Bryan Fyffe, and I'm a digital illustrator. I often refer to my work as a digital collage. And most of the pieces I do are a combination of hand-drawn elements, texture photography, and then Illustrator and Photoshop work. And with the texture photography, it's often just either a photograph of like a peeling paint or rusted metal, anything that just has like textural interest. And if it's something I can put on my scanning bed, I'll actually lay that on there and scan that as a high-res image to use. And that could be something like fabric or tea stains or coffee stains. So yeah, let's take a look at a few of the samples of my work here where I can show you where some of that's in effect. So a piece like this, I will start with some hand-drawn elements. The elk here are inked by hand on a separate sheet of paper, and once I've got that drawing, to the point that I like it, I'll scan it in, and then it becomes a digital asset that I can use later on in the Adobe Creative Suite. As far as the photography, you'll see things like vintage wallpaper, this texture behind the moon here. These are carrot roots that I've laid against a white background, and then I'm able to isolate that and again make it a digital element that is later brought into Photoshop. And then a lot of the color, the contrast, the more painterly aspects, I'll do with brush work and some of the tools that you'll find within the Creative Suite. So let's take a look at a few of those. So here's another example of it. The trees are hand-drawn here. Here's a case where I've used some coffee rings and tea stains to create just kind of a weathered element on top of what is otherwise very graphic shapes. I mean, if you work in Illustrator, you know it can be a very clean, very graphic styling, but these textures kind of add that warmth and nuance to the piece. This one's another good example of kind of found object photography. These are bathroom tiles, and you can see the grout and kind of the unevenness of the tile. The bulk of the house here has a wood grain texture on it. These kind of rusted metal textures here along the side of the column there. And more hand-drawn with the trees, some of the isolated shapes like the cat or the skull. And they kind of, sometimes I'll work a bit more graphic. I'll lean a little bit more into Illustrator than I will Photoshop. And that really just depends on a piece-by-piece basis. If it's something like that haunted house that is more shape-oriented, I'll build it in Illustrator, so they're the basic bones of the composition. I don't even care what color these shapes are at the moment I'm doing the Illustrator work. It's really just a means to isolate each and every shape and then add those textures, add those gradients, add those selected colors. And as far as kind of laying out or conceptualizing the pieces, I'll start with thumbnail sketches. And the thumbnail sketches aren't necessarily very detail-oriented in my case, but they build the basic shapes and the basic compositions. There are hand-drawn elements in a lot of these pieces. The fox head I rendered in graphite and then scanned that in to use it with the rest of the digital elements. My one thought when I talk to students is use everything. If you like that sketch in your sketchbook and you've tried to sit down and hammer it out with much more care and much more detail, but there's something you're losing in it, like the energy of the piece, I say use the sketch. If you have a favorite photograph that has some really neat element, isolate that and use that in your piece. So really just use everything at your disposal.